the 3 chefs that I have running this restaurant, like very close to all 3 of them, and I'll, just have this weird fucking idea, and I'll just like roll it out and be like, what do we think about this? And then the gentleman that you met, Chef Manny, he'll be like, you're fucking nuts. And I'm like, but what do you mean? He's like, we can't fucking do that. And then he'll break it down, and I'm like, yeah, we also worked like the same life, right? I worked that line for 5.5 years. Now he's worked it for 2, and like I know what he knows and vice versa. So I know that it's a little out there, and I know it's a little too much. And if we're trying to keep everything efficient, consistent across the board, it's not going to make sense.
But sometimes those ideas come back later on, and there's an opportunity, right? Like in a new restaurant concept, it might be the right thing, or you get a new piece of equipment or a new piece of real estate that you can expand the kitchen and you can do it. And something now that was previously impossible is now possible.
Well, but it's also part of leadership and part of like change to be able to push people around you to do more than what they think that they're capable of doing. So it was like, I don't know, 8 months ago, I was like, we're gonna do a tasting every night. He was like, no. And I'm like, yes. Oh yeah, this is gonna happen. He's like, oh, but this, that, and the next. I'm like, just stop looking at the blockades in front of you. Now just think smarter than the situation. And now, today, as we sit here, we have an a la carte menu that's smaller, and we have 2 tasting menus side by side. Not just 1, we have 2. And it's like, I think people, when it comes to risk, will always say no first until you give them the full breakdown of like how and why it should work. Give them the easy, just get them in there first, and then bring the full force after. And that's why we started with a classic tasting menu, which was just the classic dishes we've had for years. And then after that, I was like, all right, let's fucking put the stamp on this motherfucker. Like, let's do a modern, which is the shit that we're working on. And let's not give a fuck. Be unapologetic. And, me as the owner, I tell them all the time, like, if people don't buy it, fuck it. I'm the one that's making the call. Mm-hmm. And then there's some days that we'll go through here and, we'll do 60 covers, we'll sell 40 tastings, and we'll sell 30 moderns and 10 classics. And that's cool. But you have to push people to get there. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of that, like advertising, I feel like is somewhat similar in the fact of like you're pushing someone to understand something they maybe didn't understand before.
There's a lot of, in our case, because we have a client ultimately whose brand we're entrusted with, right? Like it's not our brand, right? Like in the case of Burger King, it wasn't our brand. It was Fernando Machado's brand and Jose Sil's brand. Jose is the CEO of RBI, the parent company. So they're entrusting us with that. And so there's a good amount of selling that has to go in why you should do this, why it makes sense, how we can do it.
Even more so, like the other weird dichotomy is like the relationship between the back of the house and the front of the house, right? Like the front of the house essentially is the salesman for what we do. So they're entrusted with the opportunity of like selling the 2 tastings, selling the wine pairing, selling all these things. Like they are the salesman behind it.
But they have to believe, because if they don't believe in one of the tasting menus, they're not going to sell it hard, right? And if they're not selling it hard, it's not going to sell. And it's really the same way in advertising. There's unfortunately in advertising, a lot of agencies, there's a big schism between the creative department. Yeah, sure.
Adrian, can you tell Casey gives another round?
There's a big, division between the client-facing account department and the creative department. The creative department wants to do all these crazy things, and they feel the account department's way too conservative. They shoot down ideas. And depending on the DNA of the agency, just like restaurants, that's another parallel. I think some restaurants are chef-led, right? And others are more like corporate and more, like it's more of a business than chef-led. And so advertising is like that. They're either creative-led or they're business-led. And so when I talked about like Zubi and us changing a little bit over the last 4 or 5 years, so, trying to bring a little more balance to the creative, bring creative up to the level of our account service, which is fantastic and phenomenal, but really doing stuff that gets noticed and that will win that acclaim of our peers, which was what this whole, Cannes Lion thing was about.